The morning sun pierced the horizon like molten gold, spilling its light across the city of Memphis, the beating heart of Egypt. The city was alive with the sound of merchants hawking papyrus and grain, the bleating of goats, and the rhythmic pounding of craftsmen shaping limestone blocks. But within the shadowed halls of the Temple of Ra, silence reigned. Nakh, now a young man of 18, strode through the massive sandstone columns, his sandals barely making a sound on the polished floors. The temple smelled of incense and river clay, and the air was thick with the hushed whispers of priests. Here, every step carried meaning, every gesture was steeped in tradition, and every eye was watchful. He had been chosen as a scribe of the sun god, not by birthright, but by the whispering voice of Ra that had guided him since childhood. The path was not easy. Nakh's days were filled with memorizing sacred texts, learning hieroglyphics, performing rituals, and decoding the complex patterns of the heavens. The priests, who had trained pharaohs for generations, now trained him, some with curiosity, some with suspicion. Among his teachers was priest Menes, the elder who had first recognized Nakh's unusual connection to the sun. Menes had grown both protective and wary of the boy, understanding that Nakh carried within him a destiny that the temple had not seen in centuries. "You must learn the ways of the gods, Nakh," Menes said one evening, guiding him through a corridor lined with gilded statues. "But remember, knowledge is dangerous. The eyes of mortals are weak. They cannot see what you may one day reveal." Nakh nodded, though his mind was restless. For months he had noticed patterns in the stars that did not match the teachings of the priests. Constellations shifted, aligning in ways that hinted at knowledge beyond the earth, as if the heavens themselves were sending him a secret. It was during a night of particularly brilliant stars that he first discovered the forbidden chamber. Guided by a series of inscriptions he had memorized, he slipped through a narrow passage hidden behind a wall of carved limestone. The door creaked, protesting after centuries of neglect, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. At the bottom lay a chamber unlike any he had seen. Walls engraved with strange symbols, floors inlaid with reflective obsidian, and in the center, a pedestal holding a scroll.
"Keperenakh, you are chosen. The path is set. Build the gateway, guard the light, and one day the world will remember." Nakh fell to his knees, overwhelmed. The chamber seemed alive with 1,000 tiny lights, each flicker carrying knowledge too vast for a mortal mind. Yet he understood. This was no mere ritual. This was a blueprint, a prophecy intertwined with his very soul. Over the following months, Nakh devoted himself entirely to mastering the hidden knowledge. He studied astronomy, learning the exact alignments of stars and planets that dictated the cycles of the Nile. He learned geometry, discovering that angles and proportions could manipulate light and shadow in ways that could create illusions, or even more, concealments within the pyramids that would endure for millennia. He observed the movements of the sun with meticulous care. Every day he charted the rising and setting rays, noting how they penetrated temple halls, kissed statues, and illuminated hidden inscriptions. The more he learned, the more he realized that the priest's teachings were only a fragment of what the ancients had known. One night, while meditating atop the temple's highest terrace, Nakh witnessed a rare celestial alignment. The constellation of Orion's belt glimmered directly above the Nile, and a comet streaked across the sky. The voice returned. "The hour of preparation nears. Build as the gods command. Your tomb will be more than a resting place. It will be a beacon, a vault, a passage. One day the distant lands will awaken it." He shivered. The prophecy was no longer abstract, it was becoming real. He was not just a pharaoh, he was a guardian of knowledge, entrusted with secrets powerful enough to change the world. But the road was fraught with danger. Not all priests were loyal. Some coveted power, seeing in Nakh's rapid rise a threat to their own influence. Nakh had to navigate political intrigue, learning when to speak, when to listen, and when to act silently. He discovered hidden factions within the temple who sought to control access to sacred texts. They would test him, but they could not break the bond he shared with the voice of Ra. And he began experimenting with small constructions within the temple grounds. Using the principles outlined in the Book of Thoth, he built reflective surfaces that channeled sunlight into dark rooms, revealing inscriptions invisible in ordinary light. Some priests whispered that these were tricks, but Nakh understood their purpose: to hide knowledge in plain sight, allowing only those who were chosen and trained to access it. And in the quiet moments, he continued to receive visions, glimpses of distant deserts, mountains, and waters he had never seen. Among these visions were images of strange lands across great waters and people who would one day uncover his tomb and awaken the knowledge he safeguarded. The weight of destiny pressed upon him, but he felt no fear. For Nakh, now Keperenakh, understood a truth the world often forgets: that the greatest power was not in armies or gold, but in knowledge, preserved and protected across time. By the end of his training, Keperenakh was no longer merely a boy or a novice priest. He was a pharaoh in preparation, a master of light, shadow, and secret knowledge. He had discovered the forbidden chambers, interpreted the prophecies, and glimpsed a future that stretched far beyond Egypt's borders. The time would come when he would have to assert his rule, construct a pyramid unlike any other, and hide secrets that would remain untouched for thousands of years, until they reached the hands of someone in a faraway land, millennia later, in modern America. Keperenakh stood atop the temple terraces, the wind from the Nile brushing against his face. The sun rose, and its first rays painted the world in gold.
The sun rose, and its first rays painted the world in gold. He whispered to himself, a vow, a prophecy, a prayer. I will rise beyond death. I will speak with the gods, and the light I protect will shine across the ages.